Hey guys, tonight we're going to embark on a journey back to the 18th century, where the vast oceans were tamed by the might of sailing ships and, surprisingly, the presence of cats. Yes, those adorable creatures we think of lounging by the window or chasing the occasional stray mouse. Imagine you're on a ship the horizon, stretching endlessly before you, the salty sea breeze whispering in your ears. The crew is busy with their tasks, and amidst the bustle, there's a cat curled up in the sun, or skittering around with purpose. But this isn't just any cat. No, this cat is crucial to your survival. You probably wouldn't survive this particular voyage without it. Cats on ships weren't just for company. These furry companions were tasked with some very important roles. But one of the most peculiar functions that sailors believed their cats served was to predict the weather. Now, before you roll your eyes at the idea of a cat foretelling a storm, let's paint a picture of life on the high seas back in the 1700s. It wasn't as simple as pulling out your smartphone and checking the weather app. Was it? Nope. Back then, weather forecasting was as much about superstition as it was about observation. And cats, yes, cats became an integral part of this system. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, while you're at it, go ahead and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love hearing from you all. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Now, let's explore how it all began. Cats, whether as protectors of food stores or guardians of morale, weren't always just little fuzzy faces running around below deck. They were useful creatures providing value to sailors in ways you might not expect. But weather prediction. That's where things start to get a little more interesting. Imagine the setting: a sturdy wooden ship rocking gently on the open sea, with the horizon seemingly endless in every direction. The crew is at work, hoisting sails, charting courses, and keeping watch. And there amidst it all, a cat sits quietly observing its fur ruffled by the salt air. The cat isn't just a passive companion. It plays a pivotal role in the day-to-day lives of sailors. But here's the kicker: many believed that the actions of this humble feline could predict the weather. Yes, really. Cats, it seems, were thought to have an uncanny ability to sense storms, shifts in the wind, and changes in the sea. Now, it's easy to laugh at the idea. Right, cats aren't exactly known for their meteorological prowess. But sailors didn't just pull this notion out of thin air. They had a very specific set of behaviors they looked for in their cats. And, while they might not have had access to modern weather tools, they had something that could sometimes prove just as useful: the sharp senses of their feline companions. For sailors in the 18th century, there was no radar or satellite technology. Weather changes were unpredictable and often deadly, with storms coming out of nowhere and causing massive damage to ships. But the sailors didn't let that stop them. Instead, they turned to the behavior of their cats. It was thought that when a cat's fur stood on end, or when they became unusually restless, it was a sign that something was amiss in the weather. The cat's sudden bursts of energy, or the way they nervously paced around the deck, were all indicators that a storm could be on the horizon. The sailors, accustomed to the unpredictable nature of the sea, came to trust these subtle feline cues, interpreting them as warnings of inclement weather. Historians still argue whether the cats truly had any real ability to sense the weather, or if their actions were merely coincidental. But regardless, these cats became a trusted ally on the unpredictable seas. They weren't just keeping the ship's rat population in check. They were in a way predicting storms, helping sailors navigate the often dangerous waters of superstition and intuition. In a world without reliable weather forecasts, this form of feline forecasting was as close as many sailors would get to knowing what the skies held for them. So, let's take a closer look at how these cats began to play their role as unofficial weather forecasters. Imagine you're a sailor, watching your cat, the little creature that's been with you through calm and storm. One day, the cat suddenly bolts from its sleeping spot, pacing nervously across the deck. The crew's eyes follow, knowing the signs all too well. What's coming? Is it a storm? Is the cat predicting something major? As crazy as it may sound, this kind of observation was taken seriously by sailors during long voyages. The role of cats aboard ships wasn't limited to predicting the weather. They were in fact an essential part of life at sea, serving a variety of purposes that went far beyond mere companionship. While sailors might have looked to their feline friends for signs of a coming storm, the cats also had a more practical job, keeping the ship free of pests. Rats in particular were a constant nuisance aboard ships, scurrying around and nibbling through supplies, often threatening the crew's food stores and creating a health hazard. And that's where cats truly earned their keep. Now, you may be wondering, how exactly did a cat help with this? Well, cats are natural hunters, and aboard a ship they quickly became the ultimate pest control solution. The ship's cat, typically a feisty tabby or other agile breed, was always on the lookout for rats. The presence of a cat was so important that sailors would bring one along on every voyage to ensure the ship stayed free of these destructive rodents. A hungry cat prowling the ship's deck was seen as a guarantee that no rats would feast on the crew's food and essential service on long voyages where fresh provisions were scarce. In addition to their pest control duties, cats had another role that was more psychological in nature. Long sea voyages could be grueling, with days turning into weeks, and even months spent in the company of little else besides your fellow crew members and the endless sea. The isolation and monotony of life aboard ship were tough on sailors' mental health, but having a cat on board brought a sense of normalcy and comfort. Cats are affectionate, and their presence provided a form of companionship that could lift a sailor's spirits, especially during difficult stretches of the journey, when homesickness and fatigue took their toll. The soothing purr of a cat could in a strange way make the vast ocean seem a little smaller, a little more bearable. Historians still debate the true psychological benefits of cats aboard ships, whether they provided a much-needed sense of calm or were simply a distraction from the more serious concerns of the crew. But the fact remains that these feline companions were much more than cute distractions. They were part of the crew's morale system, helping to combat loneliness, keep pests at bay, and in some cases even act as a kind of early warning system for changes in the weather. A ship with a cat on board was considered lucky, a good omen for a safe and successful journey. Cats' roles in maritime history weren't just practical. They were entwined with the very fabric of shipboard life. Imagine, once again, the scene, the creaking of the ship's timbers, the wind in your hair, and that cat sitting contentedly in the sun. Perhaps it's dozing lazily, unaware that in just a few moments it will begin to act in a way that might signal a storm on the horizon. The sailors, watchful as ever, know to trust the signs. The cat's movements, its behavior, could be the difference between smooth sailing and a perilous storm. Now, let's step away from the practicalities of pest control and companionship and dive deeper into something a bit more mysterious. The cats were in a sense sailors' unofficial weather forecasters, but this wasn't just a matter of instinct. There was a whole system of beliefs and traditions that grew around the idea that cats could sense impending storms or changes in the weather. Sailors weren't just looking for subtle cues like a cat's fur standing on end, they were interpreting every little thing the cat did as a potential omen. Picture this. You're on the deck of a ship, the wind suddenly shifting the sea, taking on a darker hue. Your cat, who had been lounging lazily under a crate for hours, now stands up, stretches, and begins pacing the deck looking out to sea. Its tail twitches, its ears flick, as if it senses something you can't. You might not have been aware of the subtle changes in pressure, but your cat is, or so the sailors believed. As soon as the cat starts behaving oddly, the crew would take notice. The sailors would often use these signs along with their experience and intuition to prepare for rough weather. It's important to remember that during the 18th century, sailors didn't have the luxury of modern meteorological tools. They didn't have Doppler radar or satellite images to predict weather patterns. So they relied on the things around them, the wind, the waves, and of course the behavior of the animals on board. The idea that a cat could sense weather changes came from centuries of observation. Cats, with their acute senses, were believed to detect subtle changes in air pressure, humidity, and temperature, things that could signal an approaching storm or calm. Historians still argue whether this belief in cats as weather predictors had any true scientific basis, but there's no doubt that sailors found comfort in the idea. In fact, some sailors went so far as to say that if a cat suddenly went missing or acted strangely, it was a sure sign that bad weather was coming. These superstitions became so ingrained in maritime culture that many sailors came to regard their cats not just as pets, but as an essential part of their early warning system. But what if these beliefs weren't just the product of superstition? Could it be that cats were indeed picking up on something that humans couldn't? Cats' senses are far sharper than ours. They can hear ultrasonic sounds, detect pheromones, and even sense vibrations that are beyond our perception. Some scientists believe that this could explain the sailors' observations. Perhaps when a storm was approaching, the change in air pressure triggered a physiological response in the cat, causing it to act restless or anxious. In a world without modern tools, the sailors may have simply interpreted these actions as a sign of impending bad weather. It's curious to think about how these beliefs became so deeply ingrained in seafaring culture. What was it about the cat's mysterious behavior that made sailors trust it? Was it the calming purrs that helped them settle their nerves? Or was it the way the cat seemed to always know when to hide or when to act that made sailors put their faith in them? Either way, these animals were more than just cute faces. They were weathered veterans of the sea in their own right, equipped with their own kind of knowledge. Knowledge that sailors believed could mean the difference between life and death on the open water. Now, let's talk about the larger cultural and superstitious framework surrounding cats aboard ships. It's easy to dismiss these beliefs as quaint relics of a time long gone, but superstition was very much a part of life for sailors during the 18th century. In fact, the sea was seen as a place where the unknown ruled, where natural forces beyond human understanding dictated fate. And in a world filled with storms, treacherous waters, and unpredictable winds, sailors desperately sought anything at all that could offer a sense of control. Cats, with their mysterious ways, became more than just guardians against rats or companions for long, lonely days. They became symbols of something deeper, omens and signs from the universe. The connection between sailors and their cats was filled with spiritual overtones. Cats were often seen as magical creatures able to see into realms humans couldn't fathom. This belief wasn't confined to sailors. It extended to many cultures across the world. In ancient Egypt, for example, Cats were revered as sacred animals associated with the goddess Bastet, who was believed to have the power to protect sailors. Similarly, in Europe, cats were often viewed as keepers of good fortune, and it wasn't uncommon for sailors to believe that having a cat on board would ensure a safe voyage. Cats were seen as mystical, connected to the divine, and their behavior, particularly on the sea, was believed to hold important messages from the gods. Imagine, then, the psychological weight of having a cat on board, especially during stormy nights when the ship's crew was most vulnerable. When the cat behaved restlessly, pacing the deck or arching its back, it was easy for sailors to believe that it was sending a warning from the divine, a sign that the weather was about to turn. But it wasn't just storms that cats were thought to predict. Sailors also believed that if a cat was particularly affectionate or calm during a voyage, it meant that the seas would be peaceful, that their ship was protected. On the flip side, if a cat suddenly disappeared, it was believed to be an omen of disaster. Perhaps the cat had foreseen a storm or an accident waiting to happen. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were based on actual observations, or if they were simply a way for sailors to cope with the overwhelming uncertainty of life at sea. Some scholars suggest that sailors simply wanted to believe in something beyond their control, and cats, being elusive, independent creatures, offered them a way to do that. Others speculate that there may have been a grain of truth in the sailors' beliefs. Cats, as mentioned earlier, have incredibly sharp senses. Their ability to detect changes in the environment, whether it's a drop in barometric pressure or a shift in the atmosphere, could have made them sensitive to incoming weather changes. Whether it was superstition or science, the sailors' belief in cats as weather predictors had a firm grip on their collective psyche. As time went on, the role of cats in maritime superstitions only deepened. Cats were considered so integral to a ship's well-being that in some cases they were even granted special treatment. They were given their own space on the ship, often a little nest near the crew's quarters, and their comfort and safety were seen as a priority. In fact, if a cat was lost or harmed during a voyage, it was considered a bad omen. So much so that some sailors would refuse to set sail without a cat on board, believing that a voyage without one was doomed from the start. But despite all these superstitions, cats were still creatures of routine. They didn't care much for human beliefs or the storms that might be brewing. Their primary concern was to stay comfortable and find a warm spot to rest. However, their actions, mysterious, playful, or odd, were watched closely by the crew, who clung to their belief that these behaviors were indicators of what was to come. The sea was a harsh, unpredictable environment, and for many sailors, having a cat aboard was like having a tiny, furry oracle that could help them navigate the chaos of life at sea. Let's now shift our focus to the psychology behind the sailors' belief in cats as weather predictors. It's easy to understand why sailors would be drawn to these superstitions, given the uncertainty and danger that defined life at sea. The sea itself is unpredictable. Storms could appear without warning, and the sea's moods could change in the blink of an eye. In such an environment, humans naturally look for patterns, some tangible, some not, in an attempt to make sense of the chaos. This is where the cats come into play. Their behavior was a form of early warning system, even if the sailors didn't fully understand how it worked. It's fascinating to consider why sailors, many of whom were seasoned seafarers, would put so much trust in the behavior of a cat, a creature that on the surface seems to have little connection to the weather. Could it be that sailors simply wanted to believe in something beyond themselves? After all, life at sea was perilous, and weather prediction was at best a guessing game. The idea that a cat's movements could offer a glimpse into the future must have felt like a small, comforting reassurance in a world where danger lurked at every turn. But the psychology behind this belief goes deeper. Human beings, as social creatures, often seek patterns in their environment, whether those patterns are real or imagined. The behavior of the cat became a kind of sign or symbol, something sailors could latch onto when they felt overwhelmed by the uncertainty of the sea. A cat, purring contentedly or curling up to sleep in a warm corner of the ship, could be interpreted as a sign that all was well. Conversely, a cat's erratic behavior, scratching at the walls or darting about the deck, was seen as a sign that something was wrong, that a storm might be on the way. It was, in a sense, a psychological crutch for sailors who were trying to make sense of the chaos around them. Historians still debate the true origins of this belief. Some suggest it was simply a case of sailors interpreting random behaviors in a way that suited their needs. After all, cats are known to exhibit quirky behaviors, at times sudden bursts of energy, or inexplicable actions that could easily be read as a sign of impending weather. Others argue that the sailors' connection to their cats went beyond mere superstition. The bond between humans and animals has been studied extensively, and many researchers believe that animals, including cats, have an acute ability to sense subtle environmental cues that humans might miss. Perhaps sailors unknowingly were tapping into this unique sensitivity when they observed their cats. Regardless of the reasoning, the psychological aspect of this belief is undeniably fascinating. It sheds light on the ways humans cope with uncertainty and how we seek meaning in the world around us. Sailors were not only using cats as a practical means of pest control, they were turning them into symbols of something larger, something more profound. A cat's behavior was no longer just a quirky little occurrence, it became a crucial part of navigating the unseen forces of nature. Imagine, for a moment, the quiet moments between the hustle and bustle of life on board a sailor. Standing at the railing, gazing out at the horizon, with only the distant sound of the waves and the occasional creak of the ship for company. The cat, perched nearby, watches as well, its eyes scanning the sea, its ears flicking. The sailor watches it closely. What does the cat know? Is it trying to tell him something? Perhaps a storm is on the way, or perhaps the seas will remain calm for just a little longer. These small, almost imperceptible actions became part of the sailor's mental toolkit for surviving the harsh, unpredictable world at sea. The ship creaks gently beneath your feet as you settle into the quiet hum of the night. The ocean whispering stories through the hull. Now, let's explore how historians and scholars continue to debate the curious blend of superstition and science surrounding cats' weather-sensing reputation aboard ships. On one side of the argument, many historians emphasize the practical reasons sailors relied on cats. The ship's environment was harsh, and understanding subtle natural signs could mean the difference between safe passage and disaster. From this perspective, cats' acute senses, whiskers twitching at air pressure shifts. Ears catching faint sounds were valuable tools for early weather prediction, especially before modern instruments existed. Sailors observed and recorded these behaviors carefully, passing them down through generations, embedding them in maritime culture. However, other scholars caution that much of the belief in cats as weather oracles was likely amplified by superstition. Life at sea was perilous and unpredictable, leading sailors to cling to any sign that offered hope or control. The weather cat became a comforting figure, a symbol of luck and protection more than a scientific instrument. Some historians argue that many cat behaviors attributed to sensing storms could just be normal feline quirks interpreted through anxious human eyes. This debate extends into the broader history of maritime superstition. Just as sailors avoided whistling on deck or refused to sail on certain days, cats became part of a web of beliefs that helped crews psychologically manage the dangers of the sea. These customs were practical in their own way, creating routine and focus in a chaotic environment, but their factual basis is harder to pin down. A quirky side of this debate involves how cats' roles varied between ships and cultures. For example, some Mediterranean sailors prized cats highly, while certain Northern European crews considered cats bad luck if they behaved oddly. These differences show how cultural perspectives influenced how cat behaviors were interpreted and sometimes exaggerated. Historians still argue whether the cat's weather-sensing reputation was more a case of clever observation or hopeful myth-making. It's likely both forces shaped the legend, a blend of sharp animal instincts and human storytelling. As you imagine the cat curling up beside you on this rocking ship, you realize the truth may be less about absolute certainty, and more about the comfort found in believing something small and furry holds a secret to the sea's moods. The steady creak of timber and the rhythm of waves accompany you as we dive into the stories of famous cats who earned legendary status aboard ships, their keen senses sometimes credited with saving lives or predicting storms. These feline heroes weren't just ordinary ship cats. They became part of maritime lore immortalized by sailors' tales and official records alike. One of the most famous ship cats was Oscar, who sailed with the British Royal Navy in the 19th century. Known for his uncanny ability to find rats and alert the crew to bad weather, Oscar's behavior before storms was meticulously noted in ship logs. Sailors swore he would hide in his favorite nook long before the barometer dropped, prompting the crew to prepare for rough seas. Oscar's reputation spread far beyond his ship, making him a symbol of good luck and a trusted weather sentinel. Then there's Trim, the adventurous cat, who sailed with the explorer Matthew Flinders on his early 19th century voyages around Australia. Trim wasn't just a pest controller. He accompanied Flinders on expeditions often seen perched calmly on the ship's bow, seemingly watching the skies. Though there are no direct records of Trim predicting weather, his presence aboard these dangerous journeys inspired stories that he was more than just a pet, perhaps a quiet guardian of the ship's fate. An amusing and lesser-known story comes from a whaling ship in the Arctic, where the cat named Blizzard was said to sense approaching snowstorms. Crew members claimed Blizzard would grow restless, pacing and vocalizing until the storm passed. Some skeptics suggest Blizzard was simply reacting to the drop in temperature or the sound of the wind. But for the crew, his behavior was a crucial early warning. These famous cats weren't just functional, they were beloved crew members. Some captains gave them official roles, even pay in the form of extra food rations. They had their own hammocks or favorite spots, and their disappearance was noted with as much concern as a missing sailor. Historians still argue whether the tales of these famous ship cats were embellished over time, but the consistency across different crews and oceans suggests there's truth behind the legends. Whether it was keen feline senses or sailor folklore, these cats became symbols of hope, protection, and the mysterious connection between animal and ocean. Imagine the flick of a tail, the gleam of feline eyes under the moonlight, a small creature holding secrets of the sea that no human could fully grasp. You're right there, part of a centuries-old tradition sharing a silent bond with these whiskered watchers of the waves. The gentle sway of the ship continues as you drift deeper into the quiet world where cats and weather meet, not just in reality, but in the imagination of artists and writers through the ages. From paintings to poetry, the feline weather oracle has captured creative minds. Its mysterious aura inspiring scenes, both soothing and enigmatic. In the 18th and 19th centuries, maritime art often featured cats aboard ships, their lithe forms nestled among ropes, sails, and barrels. One popular motif was the ship's cat, perched high on the mast, or prow eyes fixed on the horizon, embodying calm vigilance. These images weren't just decorative, they reflected sailors' respect for cats as guardians and weather sentinels. In some seascapes, artists included cats with subtly twitching tails, hinting at the coming change in weather, a quiet nod to the legends sailors told. Literature, too, embraced the weather cat. Writers like Herman Melville in Moby Dick referenced shipboard cats, highlighting their role in the everyday life of sailors and their uncanny intuition. Though the novels didn't always delve into weather prediction explicitly, the presence of cats symbolized the thin line between man's control and nature's unpredictability at sea. Poets often described cats as mystical creatures, tied to the rhythms of the ocean and sky, their behavior weaving into the fabric of human emotion and fate. A quirky example comes from a 19th century sailor's diary turned novel, where a cat's tail twitching was used as a subtle plot device to signal an approaching storm, an atmospheric detail that added tension without dramatic outbursts. This literary use of feline behavior shows how deeply the idea had embedded itself into storytelling traditions. Historians still debate the extent to which artistic portrayals reflected real beliefs, or were romanticized images created to entertain or soothe audiences. Regardless, these creative works helped keep the legend alive, passing it down through generations and across cultures. Imagine a softly lit cabin on a ship, the flicker of candlelight casting shadows as a cat curls on a sailor's lap. Eyes half closed but alert. Through brush strokes and words, artists and writers have captured this intimate scene, inviting you to share in the quiet mystery of cats and their weather wisdom. The steady creak of the ship underfoot and the salty tang in the air blend into a gentle lull as we turn to the rituals, and care sailors gave their cats an important part of maintaining the weather team on board. These routines weren't just about feeding and shelter. They reflected sailors' belief that the cat's health and mood could directly influence their ability to sense changes in weather. Imagine the daily scene, dawn light spilling over the deck sailors, carefully pouring fresh water into small bowls and offering scraps of fish or bread to their feline companions. Cats weren't always treated like typical pets. They were working crew members with special status, often given extra attention before voyages known for rough seas. Some sailors even believed that a well-fed, happy cat was more likely to alert them to storms promptly. Shipboard care could be surprisingly elaborate. Sailors developed makeshift shelters to protect cats from rain and wind, and in some cases cats were provided with soft bedding in corners of the captain's cabin or below deck. This wasn't just comfort. A cat that was cozy and secure was thought to be less likely to panic or hide in dangerous places during bad weather. There were also rituals designed to enhance a cat's weather-sensing powers. Some crews would gently stroke the cat's whiskers or tails before setting out, almost like a good luck charm or a blessing. Others carried small charms or tokens believed to boost the cat's connection to the sea and sky. It's a delicate dance between practical care and superstition, a blend that helped sailors feel a measure of control amid the ocean's unpredictability. One quirky practice involved sailors whispering weather-related predictions to their cats as if communicating directly with the creature. While this might sound silly today, It reflects the deep bond between sailors and cats, a relationship built on trust, respect, and shared survival. A calm cat meant a calm ship, at least in the sailor's eyes. Historians still debate how widespread these rituals were, and whether they genuinely impacted cats' behavior or were mainly symbolic. But the fact that sailors devoted time and care to their cats speaks volumes about how important these animals were, not just practically, but emotionally. As you picture the crew tending to their cats in the soft morning light, you sense the quiet partnership between human and feline, each depending on the other to weather the storms ahead. The gentle rocking of the ship carries you further into the world where ancient beliefs meet modern life as we explore how cats still sail with crews today, carrying on their age-old reputation as weather sentinels. Even in our high-tech world, where satellites and instruments predict storms with precision, many sailors still swear by their feline companions' uncanny intuition. Modern sailors describe cats acting unusually before bad weather, just like their predecessors. On fishing boats and small vessels around the world, cats might suddenly vocalize more than usual, or refuse to eat hours before a storm rolls in. These anecdotes are not just old wives' tales. Some mariners genuinely credit their cats with giving early warnings that technology missed or confirmed. Imagine a sleek black cat curling up in a captain's cabin tail, twitching ever so slightly, signaling something amiss, even when the radar screen looks calm. Contemporary research supports some of these stories. Cats' acute hearing and sensitive whiskers can detect subtle environmental changes imperceptible to humans. On a moving ship, these signals may be amplified by the creaking wood and shifting ropes, making cats restless or alert. Some sailors believe that cats respond to changes in magnetic fields or atmospheric electricity, continuing a centuries-old mystery about their powers. But not all modern ships keep cats on board, especially larger commercial or naval vessels where animal policies are strict. Yet, smaller fishing boats and private yachts often maintain the tradition. In some coastal communities, cats are still seen as guardians of the sea, their presence bringing comfort and a touch of old-world magic to life on the waves. A light-hearted modern tale tells of a yacht cat named Nimbus, who reportedly refused to leave the cabin for hours before a sudden squall, prompting the crew to secure gear and check weather forecasts more carefully. Whether coincidence or feline genius, Nimbus earned a place in the hearts of her crew as the ship's unofficial weather officer. Historians still debate how much of this modern belief is cultural inheritance versus actual animal behavior. But what's clear is that cats continue to hold a special place on ships blending ancient lore with today's realities. You can almost hear the soft purr, the delicate swish of a tail as a cat settles in beside you quietly, watching the horizon, part of a long lineage of weather watchers on the sea. The ship's gentle sway and the rhythmic sound of waves carry you forward as we compare cats to other animals aboard ships and explore why felines of all creatures earned this special reputation as weather sentinels. After all, dogs, birds, and even rats shared the ship. Yet it was cats who became legendary for sensing weather changes. Dogs were common on some vessels, often companions to officers or hunters on exploration ships, while loyal and attentive dogs tended to respond more to direct commands and immediate stimuli rather than subtle environmental shifts. Their behaviors before storms were usually less consistent or less noticed by crews focused on feline movements. Birds, especially pigeons and seagulls, were also used on ship's pigeons for communication seagulls as signs of nearby land. Birds' flight patterns could signal weather changes, but their behaviors were less predictable on the confined space of a ship and often more influenced by hunger or stress. Plus, birds lacked the close daily presence cats had among the crew, making their signals less personal and less trusted. Rats, ironically, the natural enemy of cats, were abundant, but hardly helpful for weather predictions. Their skittish movements sometimes coincided with weather changes, but sailors rarely interpreted rat behavior as a useful sign, likely because rats were pests, not companions. Cats' unique combination of traits made them perfect weather watchers. Their sensitive whiskers and hearing-independent yet observant nature and ability to thrive in the ship's confined spaces gave them an unmatched edge. They were everywhere on deck below near the mast, integrated into daily life, but quietly attentive to changes invisible to humans. Interestingly, sailors often preferred cats over other animals because cats required less care and food, an important factor on long voyages where resources were limited. Cats could fend for themselves while still providing the vital pest control and weather warnings. Historians still debate why cats earned this reputation over other animals, but it's likely a mix of biology practicality and cultural symbolism. Cats became both tools and talismans, bridging the natural world and the unpredictable moods of the sea. Picture a ship bustling with activity. The dogs barking, birds squawking, rats scurrying below, while the cat sits quietly, tail flicking whiskers, twitching the silent weather oracle trusted by sailors old and new. The gentle rocking of the ship blends with the soft murmur of the sea, as we now explore the psychology behind sailors' belief in cats. As weather predictors, a fascinating mix of human need, isolation, and the search for meaning amid uncertainty. Imagine yourself alone on the endless ocean days stretching into weeks, the horizon, a constant, unchanging line. In such solitude, small signs become monumental. Life at sea was perilous and lonely. Without modern communication or instruments, sailors faced constant danger from storm, shipwreck, and illness. In this environment, any perceived control over fate was precious. Cats, with their quiet presence and sudden mysterious behaviors, became a focus of hope and reassurance. If a cat hid or meowed strangely, it wasn't just a random act, it was a warning, a signal, a reason to prepare. Psychologists suggest that this belief was a coping mechanism helping sailors manage anxiety. Assigning meaning to a cat's behavior created a narrative of predictability in an unpredictable world. It was a way to reduce fear by feeling a connection to something living and responsive. This connection to the cat became a lifeline, a symbol of safety and watchfulness. This doesn't mean cats weren't actually sensing something far from it. Their acute senses undoubtedly picked up changes humans missed. But the human mind excels at pattern recognition and storytelling, especially when survival depends on it. The cat's twitching tail or sudden meow might have been amplified in importance, transforming ordinary animal behavior into weather prophecy. One charming story tells of a sailor who credited his ship's cat with saving the crew by alerting them to an approaching storm through unusual restlessness. Whether the cat's actions were coincidence or instinct, the story illustrates how deeply intertwined animal behavior and human psychology became in maritime culture. Historians and psychologists still debate how much of the cat's reputation comes from real animal senses versus human interpretation. It's a subtle dance between nature and narrative, where belief is as powerful as fact. As you listen, the image of a quiet ship, a restless cat, and a hopeful crew unfolds a reminder that sometimes the stories we tell keep us safe just as much as the truths we seek. The ship rocks gently as you lean into the soft rhythm of the sea. And now we drift into tales of cat superstitions tied to shipwrecks and survival stories where cats' strange behaviors were believed to foretell disaster or salvation. These legends, passed down through whispers, and journals add a mysterious layer to the cat's maritime role. One common tale describes cats becoming unusually agitated or disappearing from the deck shortly before a shipwreck. Sailors believed the cats sensed danger invisible to humans, perhaps a shift in the sea's energy, or an eerie stillness in the air. In some cases, cats were said to leap from the ship just before it sank, a feline sixth sense, guiding them to safety. Such stories provided a sense of order in chaos, a way to understand the unknowable. In contrast, there are accounts where calm, collected cats aboard a ship were seen as a good omen, suggesting that the sea would remain gentle. Sailors often watched their cats closely in tense moments, seeking reassurance in their behavior. The cat's calm could steady nerves, a small anchor amid stormy seas. A particularly haunting story comes from a 17th century ship that vanished without a trace. Years later, another vessel found a lone ship's cat wandering on a deserted island, calm and well-fed, seemingly waiting for rescue. This story, whether true or fanciful, speaks to the almost mythical status cats held among sailors. Historians still debate how much these superstitions influenced real decisions during voyages. Were sailors genuinely guided by their cat's behavior, or were these stories comforting myths spun to make sense of tragedy? It's likely a blend of both. Stories gave meaning to random events, while cats' behavior sometimes genuinely helped crews respond to danger. Imagine the cat on the dark deck, ears alert, eyes shining in the night, a silent witness to both peril and hope. These tales remind us that beyond practical roles, cats carried the weight of sailors' fears and dreams on every voyage. The gentle creaking of the ship and the whisper of the waves settle around you as we reach the final stretch of this long voyage, reflecting on why cats still hold a place aboard ships today, carrying forward centuries of tradition, myth, and companionship into the modern age. Though technology now offers sophisticated weather forecasting and navigation tools, many sailors still invite cats aboard for more than just pest control. Cats provide comfort in the lonely hours at sea, their steady presence a balm against the isolation of ocean life. The tradition of the ship's cat continues in small fishing boats, private yachts, and coastal communities, where the bond between humans and felines remains strong. Some modern sailors claim their cats still exhibit the ancient weather-sensing behaviors, hiding before storms, twitching tails signaling changes in the air. Whether instinct, habit, or a touch of magic, these stories keep the legend alive, connecting today's mariners to their forebears. A cat, curling on the warm wooden deck, eyes half closed but alert, is a living thread linking past and present. Beyond their practical and mythical roles, cats on ships remind us of the importance of companionship in harsh environments. They offer softness amid salt and steal a touch of home far from shore. This companionship transcends utility. It's a relationship built on trust, respect, and shared survival. Historians still debate the exact reasons cats became such weather oracles. But what matters most is the bond forged between sailor and cat, a partnership that has weathered storms both literal and metaphorical for centuries. As you picture your ship cat softly purring beside you, the sea's steady heartbeat fades into a calm whisper. The night stretches ahead vast and full of possibility. But with this small creature by your side, you feel a quiet certainty that no matter what the weather brings, you're not alone. You're gliding through the pages of history now, where cats and the sea mingle not only in practical tales, but in the brush strokes and verses of art and literature. Imagine a quiet harbor at dusk, ships bobbing gently in the water, and somewhere on the weathered deck, a sleek feline perched on a coil of rope, its gaze tracing the horizon. This image, charming and serene, has danced through centuries in paintings, poems, and stories, quietly reinforcing the bond between cats and sailors. Artists from the Dutch masters of the 17th century to Victorian illustrators loved to capture cats aboard ships. There's a peculiar kind of stillness in these artworks, cats, curling by lantern-light tails, flicking slowly as the ship sways, often accompanied by sailors' weary but hopeful faces. In these scenes, cats symbolize calm amidst the uncertainty of the sea, a steady companion watching over the crew. One painting that sailors might have eyed often is by Willem van de Velde the Younger, where a small tabby curls atop a barrel while men adjust the sails around it. The cat's presence isn't just decorative. It silently testifies to daily life aboard ship, where the creature's soft purrs and quiet prowls break the monotony of long voyages. Literature offers its own treasure trove of cat-sea imagery. Take, for instance, the maritime tales of Joseph Conrad or Herman Melville. While neither protagonist's ship cats are front and center, subtle references to felines appear small moments that hint at a deeper folklore beneath the waves. Even in sailors' ballads and sea shanties, the cat makes appearances sometimes as a lucky charm, sometimes as a harbinger of weather. Historians still argue whether these literary nods reflect sailors' genuine beliefs or simply the poetic flourish of storytellers keen to add a dash of mystery to their yarns. There's also an intriguing niche of maritime postcards and prints from the early 20th century that feature cats in nautical garb, or with whimsical captions like Storm Watchers or Captain's Quiet Companion. These images, though light-hearted, underscore a cultural thread. Cats weren't just stowaways. They were part of the ship's identity. Their silhouettes against moonlit waves inspired calm and quiet confidence in the face of unpredictable weather. On a quirky note, some artists fancied cats as miniature sailors themselves, dressing them in tiny hats or painting them steering miniature ships. While you might chuckle at this quaint fantasy, it's a fascinating reflection of how deeply cats were woven into the fabric of maritime culture, not just as pest controllers or weather predictors, but as figures of affection and myth. Remember, this artistic representation helped reinforce sailors' emotional bonds with their feline companions. After all, long sea voyages could be lonely affairs, and a cat's soft presence offered a kind of quiet comfort. This relationship, immortalized in brush strokes and ink, blends the practical with the poetic, weaving cats into the very soul of seafaring life. So, as you picture that tabby curled on deck in a fading sunset, remember that behind every stroke and every line lies a story of sailors seeking calm of creatures, sensing shifts in the air, and of a gentle companionship that sailed the world's oceans for centuries. You feel the gentle sway of the ship beneath your feet as you imagine the daily routines aboard these wooden vessels. Routine not just for sailors, but for their feline companions as well. Cats aboard ships weren't merely mystical weather predictors or artistic muses. They played a very practical, hands-on role in maintaining ship hygiene. Think of the ship as a floating city, tight quarters with wooden planks and barrels, all a perfect playground for rodents. Rats and mice weren't just unwelcome guests. They were potential carriers of disease, nibblers of precious supplies, and occasional thieves of the crew's hard-earned rations. This is where cats stepped in, as the silent, furry guardians of the ship's health. Their hunting prowess was highly valued. Sailors would often keep an eye on the number of rats caught, almost like a tally of the cat's usefulness. It wasn't unusual for the crew to hold a quiet ceremony of sorts when a particularly good mouser aboard scored a victory. Imagine a cat proudly parading its prize, the ship's men nodding in appreciation. Some even believed cats had a sixth sense about where rats would hide, and would follow them into the darkest nooks and crannies without hesitation. Historians still argue whether this cat-based pest control significantly reduced shipborne illnesses or simply gave sailors peace of mind. But there's no denying that cats reduce the damage caused by rodents keeping important stores of food and rope intact. After all, imagine trying to sail across the Atlantic with half your sails chewed through or your grain supplies riddled with holes. Your voyage wouldn't exactly be smooth sailing. A quirky maritime tidbit involves the belief that cats themselves helped prevent the spread of ship fever, a kind of typhus often linked to dirty conditions and rat infestations. Some sailors thought that having a cat aboard helped keep a kind of balance, not just by catching rats, but by somehow cleansing the atmosphere with their presence. Of course, this idea blends superstition with observation, but it's a testament to how much cats were woven into the health rituals of seafaring life. And yet cats could be a bit finicky about their duties. You might picture a noble feline ignoring a stray mouse if it preferred a cozy spot in the captain's cabin. Their moods and behaviors sometimes puzzled sailors, one minute stalking shadows the next, curled up for a nap. These unpredictable antics even sparked informal debates among crews about which cat was the best hunter or the most superstitious. Imagine the scent of salt air mixed with the faint musk of hay and fur, the sound of creaking timbers blending with a cat's soft meow, a subtle symphony of shipboard life. Cats weren't just hygiene helpers. They were part of the ship's ecosystem, contributing to the balance in their own quiet way. So, as you relax into this gentle rhythm of ship life, remember that the cat's role in maintaining cleanliness and health was as important as its reputation for sensing weather. Both practical and mysterious, these furry crew members kept the ship and its people safer, often without a single sailor, fully realizing just how much they depended on their watchful feline companions. As you settle deeper into the gentle rocking of the imagined ship, let's explore the psychology behind why sailors and humans in general might have projected such impressive weather-sensing powers onto cats. It's a bit like your brain playing detective in a cozy mystery, spotting patterns and weaving stories where maybe there's just coincidence or at least something more subtle. Humans have always sought ways to predict the unpredictable, especially when your life depends on it, like being at sea with nothing but wooden planks, sails, and a small crew to rely on. Weather forecasting wasn't a science yet. It was a game of guessing and hoping. In that context, any behavior that might hint at a coming storm was worth paying attention to. Enter cats, creatures who move quietly, observe keenly, and often react to things invisible to us. Psychologists today suggest that humans have a tendency called pattern recognition, where we connect dots even if the lines aren't really there. So, when a cat suddenly fluffs its fur, or darts into the captain's cabin moments before a squall, sailors remember that moment almost like it was a premonition. This kind of selective memory makes cats seem like weather prophets, even if sometimes the cat was just chasing a shadow or yawning. Sailors might have also experienced confirmation bias, noticing and recalling the times cats appeared restless before bad weather, but forgetting the many times cats ignored weather changes entirely. This bias helped cement the feline's reputation. After all, if you're stuck on a ship in the middle of the ocean, you'll cling to any hopeful sign that might keep you safe, including the twitch of a cat's whisker. There's a charming quirk here. Cats themselves are highly sensitive to environmental changes, like shifts in barometric pressure or humidity, much more so than humans. Their whiskers, inner ear balance, and even sensitive paws might pick up on things before we do. So the sailors weren't entirely imagining it. They just interpreted these natural feline reactions through a lens of superstition and storytelling. Historians still argue whether sailors' belief in cats' weather-predicting powers was mostly psychological comfort or based on genuine observation of feline behavior. Maybe it was a little of both, a blend of biology and human hope mingling into maritime myth. Interestingly, this psychological tendency isn't limited to sailors. Across cultures, people have imbued animals with special powers to make sense of the world around them, like cows predicting rain or dogs sensing earthquakes. Cats fit neatly into this tradition thanks to their quiet mystery and elusive nature. So, as you picture that cat flicking its tail just as clouds gather, think about how human minds desperate for control over the vast and unpredictable sea found a trustworthy friend in these furry enigmas. It's a gentle reminder that sometimes belief itself can be as soothing as certainty, especially when the waves are high and the night is dark. Now, as the ship gently creaks and creaks again under the sway of the sea, let's broaden our view beyond just cats and look at other animals sailors relied on to predict the weather. After all, the ocean is a vast stage, and many creatures have played their parts in maritime lore and life, each adding a layer to the delicate balance of shipboard survival. First up, the humble pigeon. While cats prowled the decks, hunting rats, pigeons were often carried aboard ships as messengers, but sailors noticed something else. Pigeons sometimes changed their behavior just before storms. These birds might become restless or reluctant to fly, and sailors took that as a sign of impending bad weather. Interestingly, pigeons have excellent navigational skills and can sense magnetic fields, so their behavior might reflect subtle environmental cues invisible to human eyes. Historians still debate how much sailors relied on pigeons' mood swings for forecasting, but these feathered weather forecasters were definitely part of the nautical toolkit. Then there were the dolphins, those playful sentinels of the sea. When pods of dolphins appeared close to the ship, sailors often took it as a good omen, sometimes signaling calm seas ahead. But the flip side is that their sudden absence or erratic movements could indicate changes in water temperature or pressure, hinting at storms to come. Of course, unlike cats confined to decks, dolphins were free to roam and their signals were a little harder to interpret, yet sailors held on to these signs just the same. Not to be overlooked are the canaries, though more famous for their role in mining canaries, sometimes found a place on ships too. Their sensitivity to toxic gases made them early warning systems below decks, but sailors might have extended their observations to weather changes, interpreting the bird's behavior as part of the ship's barometer of sorts. Oddly enough, even fish played a part. Fishermen would watch for unusual fish behavior near the surface, jumping or gathering in unusual patterns as clues to shifting weather. This created a kind of living weather map beneath the waves, whispered about in taverns and recorded in logs. What makes all this animal forecasting so fascinating is the mix of direct observation and superstition practical use and myth. Cats, with their fur fluffed against a coming squall, fit snugly into a broader tapestry of creatures whose behaviors intertwined with sailors' survival strategies. It's almost poetic, the quiet cat below deck, the restless pigeon overhead, the graceful dolphin offshore, all tuned to the invisible rhythms of the ocean and sky. This interspecies weather network helped create a shared understanding on the ship, a collective vigilance blending nature and human hope. Historians still argue how reliable these animal signs really were, but it's clear they offered sailors a form of comfort, something tactile and familiar, amid the vast uncertainty of the sea. So next time you imagine a ship setting out into the fog picture, not just the cat watching the clouds, but a chorus of creatures each playing their subtle part in the symphony of weather prediction. It's a reminder that sometimes survival depends not just on technology or skill, but on the quiet wisdom of the natural world around us. The air grows softer now as you drift deeper into the maritime world, where cats and sailors forged bonds not just out of necessity, but through shared rituals and quiet hopes. It's time to explore how cats featured in the rituals and prayers sailors performed, hoping to coax favorable weather or safe passage from the often unpredictable sea. Picture a captain standing on deck just before dawn, hands folded, voice low, addressing the crew, and more subtly the ship's cat. Sailors believed that invoking the presence of their feline companions during prayers helped appease the spirits of the sea or the weather gods. This was less about formal religion and more about blending superstition with routine acts to ease anxiety before long voyages or approaching storms. One common ritual involved gently stroking the cat's fur while whispering good wishes for calm seas. The softness of the cat's purring was thought to harmonize with the ship's rhythm, creating a calming effect on both crew and vessel. Some sailors even believed that a cat's purr could influence the weather itself, a soothing vibration that would calm angry winds. Ceremonies sometimes included leaving small offerings, bits of fish or scraps of bread near the cat's favorite resting spot. These gifts were tokens of respect, a way to honor the animal's role in protecting the ship. Some sailors swore that ignoring the cat's needs could bring misfortune, an idea that reinforced careful treatment of these furry sentinels. Historians still argue how widespread these rituals were, or if they were isolated to certain fleets or regions. However, logs and diaries from the Age of Sail occasionally mention sailors treating cats as more than just pets, hinting at a shared belief in their spiritual significance. Beyond prayers, cats appeared in superstitions about luck and weather. For instance, a black cat walking toward the bow was sometimes seen as a sign of good weather ahead, while one crossing the ship's path might signal a brewing storm. These interpretations varied, even contradicting each other depending on the culture or even the mood of the crew. It's worth noting how these rituals and beliefs provided a psychological anchor in the volatile life at sea. When the weather was uncertain and danger looming, focusing on the cat's presence gave sailors a tangible symbol of hope and continuity. The act of ritual itself, quiet, repetitive, and gentle, helped soothe nerves, much like the soft hum of a fan on a restless night. So, as you imagine this ritualistic moment, hands stroking fur, whispered hopes, mingling with salty air, feel the subtle power of routine and reverence working quietly below the surface of seafaring life. The cat wasn't just a weather watcher. It was a vessel for hope, a living charm against the unknown. You drift now into the language of the sea, where words and phrases carry the weight of countless voyages, and whisper the secrets of sailors' lives. Among these, the feline thread weaves subtly through nautical expressions, painting pictures of weather luck and life aboard ship. It's like uncovering a secret code spoken in salt and shadow. Consider the phrase, raining cats and dogs. Though you might think it's just a wild way to describe a storm, some scholars suggest this odd idiom may hint at the chaos of weather at sea, where the presence or absence of cats on ships could symbolically represent stormy or calm conditions. Historians still argue about its exact origins, but it's a reminder of how cats slipped quietly into everyday language linked to weather. Another curious term is cat's paw, used to describe a light breeze that stirs the water's surface. This phrase emerged from sailors observing the delicate ripples caused by gentle winds. Ripples they likened to a cat's soft paw touching the sea. Imagine a calm morning, the water barely moving except for these subtle signs. The phrase captures the quiet intimacy between cat's wind and sailors' senses. Let the cat out of the bag also sails in from seafaring times, originally referring to deceptive practices in markets, but later taking on broader meanings. The nautical connections here are debated, yet some think the phrase's survival hints at how cats, literal or metaphorical, permeated sailors' daily talk. Sailors also used catting around to describe moving stealthily or aimlessly, often with a humorous nod to the feline behavior of prowling. This term offered a light-hearted way to describe shifting winds, or even crew members wandering the decks. Of course not. Every phrase had weather links, but the cat's influence in language reveals how deeply these creatures embedded themselves in sailors' worldview. The words carried layers of meaning, gently reminding everyone of the feline's presence, whether in the hull or in the minds of those aboard. This linguistic legacy continues quietly today, floating ashore in idioms and expressions that outlast the wooden ships and salty sailors. When you hear these phrases, it's like a soft purr from history, an echo of times when cats and sailors shared not just decks, but language and lore. So, next time you use one of these sayings, picture the ship's cat brushing past your legs as you whisper about the cat's paw breeze or chuckle about catting around. It's a small, cozy connection to a long tradition where language and life at sea intertwined in subtle, comforting ways. As the gentle sway of the ship continues, you find yourself wondering if all cats aboard were created equal. Were some breeds more favored by sailors, perhaps believed to have sharper senses or better luck? It turns out sailors did indeed show preferences often shaped by practical needs, local superstitions, and a dash of folklore. In northern European fleets, especially around the British Isles, the classic short-haired tabby was a common sight on deck. These cats were valued not only for their hunting skills, but also for their resilience to colder, damp climates. Sailors believed these hardy cats could better withstand harsh weather and long voyages. Imagine a rugged tabby curling up near the ship's wheel, braving salt spray and wind, quietly keeping watch. Meanwhile, Mediterranean sailors sometimes preferred cats with lighter coats like the slender Turkish van or Anatolian cats. Their lighter fur was thought to keep them cooler in hot, sunny ports, and their agile, curious nature made them excellent mousers in bustling harbors. Some maritime communities even attributed mystical qualities to certain coat patterns, believing them to be protectors against storms or bad luck. Oddly enough, black cats had a particularly ambivalent reputation on ships. In some cultures, a black cat's presence was considered an excellent omen, a guardian against storms and misfortune. Sailors would sometimes keep a black cat specifically for this purpose, hoping its dark fur would absorb bad luck like a living talisman. On the flip side, other crews regarded black cats with suspicion linking them to witches or bad weather, and might avoid them. This contradictory view illustrates how regional folklore shaped seafaring beliefs in fascinating ways. Historians still debate how much actual breeding choices influenced these preferences versus simple availability. After all, ship cats were often rescues or stowaways adopted from ports along the route. But the lore surrounding certain breeds persisted subtly guiding sailors' attitudes and care. Interestingly, some sailors believed that particular breeds were more attuned to atmospheric changes, and thus better weather cats. This belief might have influenced how cats were treated aboard, sometimes even given a sort of honorary rank. Imagine a ship's cat decked out with a simple collar respected as a sort of furry weather officer. This preference for certain cats also shaped how crews interacted with their feline companions, whether dashing out to rescue a cat from a stormy forecast or providing extra warmth below decks. The bonds sailors formed with these specific cats were practical, emotional, and mythic all at once. So, as you imagine these various breeds prowling the decks or nestled in cozy corners, remember that cats at sea weren't just random passengers. They were chosen, cherished, and sometimes mythologized members of the crew, each with their own quiet legend. As the ship creaks softly beneath your imagined feet, it's time to consider how these age-old feline senses stacked up against the early weather forecasting tools sailors used. Before the age of satellites and barometers, sailors combined natural signs, animals' behaviors, and simple instruments to read the sky's mood. The earliest weather instruments on ships were often basic barometers, glass tubes filled with mercury or water, reacting to air pressure changes. While these were marvels of technology in their time, they were still crude by today's standards and prone to breakage at sea. So, alongside these fragile gadgets, sailors still kept a keen eye on their cats, trusting their instincts as a living, breathing barometer. You might picture a sailor glancing from a delicate barometer to a cat whose fur suddenly bristles, deciding which warning to trust more. Sometimes the cat's behavior preceded the barometer's shift, lending credibility to the feline's supposed weather sense. At other times, the instruments told a different story, causing debate among crews about which was more reliable. In addition to barometers, sailors used wind vanes, compasses, and simple thermometers, primitive tools that began to usher in a new era of weather prediction. But the instruments lacked the emotional and experiential weight that cats carried. The cat's presence offered a living connection to the environment that instruments, no matter how clever, couldn't replicate. Historians still argue whether these early devices gradually replaced animal-based weather prediction or whether they simply supplemented it. In some fleets, both were used side by side for decades, a blend of science and superstition. Interestingly, cats might have unknowingly contributed to scientific observations. Their sensitivity to subtle changes like shifts in humidity or air pressure mirrored the readings of early instruments, perhaps inspiring sailors and scientists to take a closer look at weather patterns. This natural barometer was not just folklore, but a reflection of biological reality. Of course, the relationship between technology and tradition wasn't always smooth. Some sailors distrusted instruments, clinging to the more familiar comfort of feline behavior, while others mocked such superstitions. This tension between science and superstition played out in the small communities aboard ships, echoing larger societal debates on knowledge and belief. So, as you imagine this gentle tension, the fragile glass barometer hanging near the mast, the soft fur of a cat twitching nearby. Think about how sailors navigated not just oceans, but also the uncertain waters of changing knowledge. The dance between instrument and instinct, science and story shaped the way they faced the unpredictable sea. You're now gently sliding into a time when weather forecasting began to change the very fabric of seafaring life, subtly shifting the role cats played aboard ships. Imagine the early 19th century, when meteorology started its slow but steady rise as a respected science, bringing new tools and knowledge to the decks of vessels that once relied heavily on instinct and superstition. With the invention of the marine barometer, the anemometer for measuring wind speed, and the telegraph enabling weather reports from distant ports, sailors gradually gained more concrete ways to predict storms and shifts in weather. This evolution wasn't overnight, though. The knowledge traveled as slowly as the ships themselves, and many crews still clung to the reassuring presence of their cats, whose fur and behavior seemed to signal what instruments could not. These advancements began to reduce the need for cats as weather sentinels, changing how sailors viewed their furry companions. Cats moved from being crucial weather predictors to more of a comfort presence, still beloved, but less relied upon for forecasting. The old stories persisted, however, passed down in taverns and ship logs, keeping the legend alive even as science advanced. Historians still debate how quickly these scientific tools displaced the older belief systems. In some remote fleets or on smaller trading ships, cats remained weather predictors well into the 20th century. In larger naval forces, the transition happened faster, reflecting broader acceptance of meteorology. This shift also had practical implications as ships modernized and machinery replaced sails. Rodent problems diminished, reducing the need for feline hunters. Electric lighting and improved sanitation made the cramped, damp quarters less welcoming to cats, further nudging them off ships. Yet the emotional bond between sailors and cats endured. Even as their practical roles faded, cats remained symbols of luck and guardians of morale. Their presence continued to soothe sailors facing long, lonely voyages, much like a soft lullaby against the roar of the ocean. So, as you imagine this subtle change, the flicker of electric lights replacing lanterns, barometers ticking quietly on the wall, and cats curling into smaller corners, remember that science didn't erase tradition. It transformed it. The cat's role evolved, but never vanished, echoing the way humans adapt and hold on to comforting stories amid progress. Now you're drifting into the quiet halls of maritime museums, where the stories of ship cats and their weather-sensing legends are lovingly preserved. Picture walking through a softly lit gallery, the air tinged with the scent of polished wood and saltwater memories, where artifacts and exhibits whisper of cats who once prowled the decks of famous vessels. Museums dedicated to naval history often feature sections honoring these furry crew members. There, you might find weathered photographs of cats curled on the bow, worn collars inscribed with ship names, and even handwritten logs noting a cat's curious behavior before storms. These tangible mementos bring to life the deep bond between sailors and their feline companions, a relationship that combined practicality with superstition and affection. One exhibit might showcase a ship's bell alongside a small brass plaque dedicated to a beloved ship cat, who warned of approaching weather, credited in sailors' tales with saving lives through quiet vigilance. In another corner, you could encounter paintings and sailor journals describing cats as both guardians and weather prophets. Historians still debate the accuracy of some of these stories, especially when museum narratives blend documented fact with legend. But the emotional truth remains clear. cats were cherished members of maritime life. The careful preservation of their stories in museums helps keep these soft whispers of history alive for new generations. Quirky displays often include sailor-made cat toys, fashioned from scraps of rope and cloth, hinting at the affection these animals inspired even in the roughest crews. There's something tender in these small artifacts, a reminder that amid the hard life at sea, moments of softness and care prevailed. Museums also sometimes host talks or special events centered on ship cats, where experts discuss the blend of myth biology and history behind cats' reputed weather senses. These events draw in curious visitors who want to feel the quiet magic of maritime folklore, the kind that lulls you to sleep with gentle tales rather than thunderous storms. So, as you picture yourself strolling through such an exhibit, take a moment to appreciate the quiet ways cats shaped seafaring culture, not only as real living companions, but as enduring symbols preserved in wood, brass, and ink forever, part of the sea's soft history. As the sea breeze gently whispers through your mind, let's revisit some of the most famous sea storms, where cats supposedly sensed danger first. These stories, passed down through generations, have become maritime legends, moments where feline intuition seemed to intertwine with the very fate of the ship and its crew. Take, for example, the 1854 storm that battered the clipper ship Sea Serpent off the coast of Cape Horn, notorious for its treacherous waters. According to sailor diaries, the ship's black cat suddenly grew restless hours before the storm hit, pacing the deck, flicking its tail, and hiding in the rigging. The crew took this unusual behavior seriously, battened down the hatches early, and managed to survive what could have been a catastrophic wreck. Historians still argue whether the cat's behavior was a coincidence or a genuine early warning, but the tale lived on a comfort and a caution in one. Another story tells of the HMS Victory Admiral Nelson's famed flagship. Although cats aboard the Victory were primarily kept for pest control, sailors recalled one ginger cat's uncanny ability to sense shifts in weather during long blockades. Crew members noted that when the cat withdrew below decks and remained unusually quiet, bad weather or enemy activity often followed. The line between weather prediction and tactical survival blurred in these tales, reflecting how much trust was placed in feline intuition. There's also a charming, less dramatic story from a small fishing schooner off the coast of Newfoundland, where a ship's cat famously saved the crew from a sudden squall by leading them to shelter. The cat's sudden dash to the bow and frantic meowing alerted the sailors just in time to raise the sails and avoid disaster. Such stories, though hard to verify, highlight how cats became part of the collective maritime memory symbols of hope and guardianship. These storm tales often served a double purpose. Not only did they reinforce the cat's role as weather predictor, but they also fostered crew morale during frightening times. The idea that a small creature might sense the invisible dangers lurking beyond the horizon offered a psychological anchor amid chaos. Of course, some skeptics argue these stories are sailors' lore romanticized after the fact with a good dose of luck and hindsight bias. Historians still debate the line between myth and reality, but the endurance of these stories speaks to the powerful place cats hold in seafaring culture. So, as you picture these storms and their feline sentinels, feel the gentle pulse of hope that cats brought to sailors facing the wrath of the ocean, a soft, furry shield against the unknown. The ship rocks ever so gently beneath your imagined feet as you ponder the behaviors of cats in storms, those moments when sailor tales describe felines acting oddly before a tempest. Separating fact from fiction here is like untangling a fishing net. But the mystery is part of the charm. Cats are famously sensitive creatures, their bodies finely tuned to subtle changes in the environment. When storms approach, atmospheric pressure drops, humidity shifts, and the air crackles with electricity. All changes cats might physically detect. You might imagine a cat suddenly stiffening, whiskers, twitching ears, flicking before the first drop of rain even hits the deck. Sailors observed these signs keenly, interpreting a cat's sudden restlessness, hiding, or loud meowing as warnings. Sometimes the cat would pace the ship's rails. Sometimes it would retreat below decks, avoiding the impending tempest. These behaviors often preceded shifts in the weather, reinforcing the feline's reputation as a weather prophet. However, some accounts were undoubtedly embellished. Stories of cats miraculously predicting storms and saving crews border on legend, like a ship's feline captain, calmly staring into the storm, unfazed by the chaos around. Historians still debate which tales are truthful observations, and which are sailors' yarns spun to pass long nights at sea. One curious fact: cats have a layer of cells in their eyes called the tapetum lucidum, which enhances low-light vision. This biological trait might help them detect changes in light quality before a storm, a detail that adds some scientific weight to their supposed weather sense. A quirky tidbit comes from the notion that cats can hear infrasound low-frequency sounds below the range of human hearing, which often accompany storms and earthquakes. Whether cats truly respond to these sounds is debated, but it adds a layer of intrigue to their mysterious behavior. So, as you imagine that cat, suddenly alert tail, flicking whiskers, vibrating softly against the salt air, remember that science and story are intertwined in a dance as old as the sea itself, each feeding the other in a gentle, reassuring rhythm. As the ship hums quietly around you, let's gently consider what modern sailors might still learn from the old tales of cats and weather prediction. While today's mariners rely heavily on high-tech instruments, satellites, radar, and digital forecasts, there's something timeless in the instincts and attentiveness that cats symbolized a lesson in subtle observation. Imagine a sailor today, amid the constant glow of screens and alerts, pausing to notice the smallest shifts in wind direction, the faint scent of rain carried on the breeze, or even the behavior of wildlife near the ship. In this way, the old belief in cats as weather sentinels encourages a kind of mindfulness, a connection to nature that no machine can fully replicate. Modern marine biologists observe that many animals remain sensitive to environmental changes. Birds altering their flight paths, fish schooling differently, even dogs reacting to storm pressure. So, while cats might not be standard issue on contemporary vessels, the principle of tuning into natural signs persists. There's also a deeper, more psychological lesson in stressful, uncertain environments. Rituals and symbols like caring for a cat can soothe anxiety and foster group cohesion. Even today, sailors sometimes bring pets or mementos aboard for comfort and morale, echoing centuries-old traditions. Historians still debate how much of the cat's weather-sensing reputation was practical and how much was myth. But the legacy offers a gentle reminder. Technology and intuition can coexist, each enriching the other. The cat's soft purr might not predict a storm, but its calming presence reminds sailors to pause, observe, and respect the rhythms of the natural world. So, as you imagine a modern ship quietly rocking beneath a vast sky, picture the old feline wisdom lingering like a soft whisper, urging patience, attentiveness, and gentle respect for the unpredictable dance between sea and weather. You're now sailing into the vast cultural legacy cats have left across the globe, a legacy that softly ripples through maritime stories, customs, and even modern superstitions. It's a quiet, widespread presence that has endured long after the wooden ships and their crews faded into history. From the bustling ports of Asia to the cold harbors of Scandinavia, cats aboard ships became symbols of good luck, guardians of safety, and even ambassadors between the human and natural worlds. In Japan, the maneki neko, or beckoning cat, often seen in shops and homes, has roots in maritime superstition, a talisman believed to bring good fortune and calm seas. Sailors and fishermen alike treasured such symbols, sometimes carrying small statues aboard for protection. In the Caribbean, local tales often speak of cats warning of approaching storms or guiding fishermen safely home. These stories blend African-European and indigenous influences, reflecting a rich tapestry of cultural exchange woven through maritime life. The cat's role here is more than practical. It's deeply spiritual, connecting people to the unpredictable forces of nature. Across the North Atlantic, in coastal fishing villages, cats are still seen as lucky charms. Their presence on docks and boats is greeted with affection, and some communities hold festivals celebrating the bond between cats and seafarers. These celebrations mix history with folklore, honoring a shared heritage of resilience and companionship. Historians still debate how much of this cultural legacy stems from real observation versus mythologizing, but the endurance of these stories speaks volumes. Cats have become more than animals aboard ships. They are carriers of tradition, symbols of hope, and gentle reminders of the human need to find comfort in the face of uncertainty. As you drift with this cultural tide, imagine the countless sailors across centuries who found solace in a cat's quiet watchfulness. Their shared stories, rituals, and superstitions echo softly through time, weaving a gentle lullaby that soothes restless hearts across oceans and generations. So, as you settle deeper into the calm, remember that the cat's legacy at sea is not just about weather or rats, but about a timeless connection. A quiet thread tying together people, animals, and the ever-changing moods of the ocean. As you sink ever deeper into the gentle embrace of night and sea, let your mind rest on the quiet reflections of cats' ships, and weather the soft tapestry woven by centuries of sailors' stories and feline presence. Imagine the ship rocking softly, the distant splash of waves a lullaby, and a cat curled quietly. Its steady breathing a calming rhythm against the vast, unpredictable ocean. There's something profoundly soothing about this ancient partnership. Cats, with their keen senses and mysterious ways, offered more than just practical help. They brought comfort, companionship, and a whispered promise that even in the face of storms, life's small beauties endure. They watched, waited, and sensed the shifting air, not as wizards, but as creatures finely tuned to the world's subtle signals. Tonight, you drift not only through history, but through the quiet, emotional landscapes of sailors who, far from home and certainty, found solace in a cat's presence. The feline's soft purrs and gentle movements became a balm for weary souls, a touchstone amid the vast unknown. Let the images fade slowly. The cat's soft fur, the salt-tinged breeze, the flicker of lantern light on wooden decks. Feel the tension of anticipation ease, replaced by the gentle rhythm of waves and breath. Here, in this quiet space between stories and dreams, the sea's endless mystery feels less daunting, held softly in the company of a cat who knows its secrets. Sleep now, carried by this gentle narrative, wrapped in the warmth of ancient companionship, and the calm assurance that no matter the weather, you are never truly alone on the vast ocean.